Yo, what is up? What is up? Thank you for all my faithful followers. Thank you for waiting. I really appreciate it. The technicality of the setup is increasing by the stream. So that is actually really good news. Very grateful for that. If you waited since 8 p.m., I'm really, really thankful and grateful that you are watching tonight because it is going to be a good show. So we are going to start with what I believe is an intensification of the AI race, right? So the current concept that we have for development of artificial intelligence is defined within the certain ideas. So certain ideas like if you want to train a model, it's going to cost a bunch of money, billions, right? A bunch of infrastructure, tons of electricity, and that's just what everybody thought, right? If you're going to get your chips, the leading company that provides the chips is Nvidia, right? And those things were defined as, insofar as the industry is concerned, as the benchmark for how you build AI, right? Of course, we have the prevalent companies that are named so many times that I don't even want to name them in this particular conversation, just for the sake of it's not sounding redundant. But there's a bunch of American companies that are developing artificial intelligence, and for the most part, they've been on parity. With the leading one being I think it's the reasoning model. I can't remember. I think it's like O1 is that the actual model. It's the reasoning model that takes like a bunch of time to you ask it a question, and then it takes a little bit longer to think about the question, and then it responds to the question, so on and so forth. So that was the leading benchmark. And then we've had some open source contributions that were very substantial in the past year, which was the llama models, the open source llama models from Facebook, right? So conventionally, all of that's also defined within, or at least we believed at that time, that all of that's defined within the United States, right? So the United States is the lead in developing artificial intelligence. At least that's what we believed, and that's what we thought. If you're going to train a model, it's going to cost you a bunch of money. You're going to have to get your stuff from Nvidia, and all this stuff, right? So like that was a framework. Over the weekend, I started tracking on the news the release of a Chinese model by the name of DeepSeek R1, right? So this is an open model, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, there's a good chance that this particular topic right here is about to go on fire. My guess is going to get beat to death here within the next, insofar as like internet media, it's probably going to get beat to death here in the next couple months. So I started tracking. Everybody was talking about, oh look, this there's a model that finally beats out O1 or whatever. I actually don't. I'm not even caught up with the actual name of like the most advanced model from OpenAI. But either way, so like they're like, okay, like we finally from the news cycle I was seeing, I was like, there's new model that got released, and it looks like it's finally surpassed the current the high watermark, which is a model by OpenAI. Crazy thing that I saw is that first it was open source, and second it was a Chinese model, right? So I was like, okay, well, there was kind of there was similar hype around when Llama got released, the open model that Facebook developed. But this one was distinct because it was the first time that I think something hit the mainstream internet media that wasn't American. This is a US based model. So I started digging more into this, and it started to, and then I started to realize that it's distinct. The model's distinct in that it's not just another like we just dumped a bunch of money into it and look, it can like spit words back at us. It can spit words back at you, but what's spectacular about the model isn't so much as it's not really the user experience per se, but it has more to do with how it was made. Right now, the Chinese are claiming effectively that the model was trained at a fraction of the cost that it took to train the American models, right? So, like, remember that paradigm in the United States, we think, okay, because AI is this new advanced technology. You just got to throw a bunch of money at it, and eventually, boom! At the other end of it, you get output a model from it, right? Well, the thing is, if the Chinese claim is valid, and there's plenty of reasons to speculate whether or not it is valid, but if the Chinese claim is valid, they have developed a model for a fraction of the cost that the Americans have, that the American companies have. And a lot of that has to do with the restrictions that have been put around Chinese development for these models, right? There is a lot of red tape around being able, a lot of regulations around being able to actually access the hardware that American companies can access in order to develop models. So the Chinese developers, or the Chinese developers in this case, would essentially, what they had to do is that they had to find creative ways for how to train their models, and within this dynamic is how DeepSeek R1 was developed. Now, the reason why this is so crazy, if you guys take a look at Nvidia stock, now I'm always somebody who's a big fan of zooming out. I'm not a big fan of looking at a day, like looking at a stock in one day and being like, oh, if it goes red, like it's all going to explode, like it's all going to heck. That's not my style, but I will show you this. Let's see if it does. Okay, so ideally, see, present, share screen. There. Okay, so if you could see this, so this is Nvidia stock. If you look at it on the 1 year, that's a freaking nosedive, right? So people are freaking out. I mean, once you zoom out and you zoom out like the lifetime of the stock, it's like really not that big of a deal. But if you look at it on the day, the news about R1 hit somewhere here. Probably, I think it was on Friday when I first started tracking it. And then stock market closes over the weekend. Thing opened up today and boom, nosedive, dude. Nosedive. So now people are freaking out because essentially they think that this is the what seemed like it was just like a release of a new model, just like a hype cycle that comes and goes, like Anthropic will release something, or another freaking company. They're like, oh, this like the new thing or whatever. And then like the internet media news cycle just like gobbles it up, and it's like you never hear about it again. This one looks like it hit, and it's impacting the way that people are perceiving the industry as a whole. Okay. And this is a huge point because we might be at a watershed moment insofar as is this bubble breaking? I don't know. But what I do know though is that people are paying attention. This is probably the closest we've gotten to another like chat GPT moment, if you will. Now, why is this graph important? The reason why this graph is important is because for a long time, for the past essentially since ChatGPT has been released, Americans thought that they were on top of their thing, right? That they were like, okay, we are the world leader in AI development, yada yada yada. It's going to cost X amount of money. Let's throw a bunch of billions of dollars at it. I mean, the evaluation, you could just pretty much you can track the evaluation of AI by tracking Nvidia. Nvidia exploded with the advent of these text-based models that we all use now, and that was essentially the thought. It's like, okay, it's just something that you have to throw a lot of money at it to advance, and that's just how it works. So because of that, we were all contained within this paradigm of believing that the only way that you can invest in something like this is to look at the current players, which is like Nvidia and all this stuff, right? So people are putting in a bunch of money and all that stuff. And what happens is that when DeepSeek R1 gets released, essentially everybody is reevaluating actually what it requires to be able to develop these models. Okay. So the models that we have today have spend of that's somewhere in the billions, right? But the DeepSeek R1, the Chinese are claiming that they developed it in the cost of millions. So a whole freaking fraction of the cost of what it cost the Americans, right? And not just that, this is what's really stinging everyone, is that it's better. It's better. So it's cheaper. It's more widely available than the proprietary models, which were the most advanced ones. And also, what was I going to say? It costs less to make. So that's why the market right now is freaking out because they're like, okay, well, I think we got this wrong. Like everybody's reevaluating actually what it takes to develop artificial intelligence. And maybe this hype will wear down in the next week or not. But my guess is that everybody is recalculating what it actually takes to develop these models, and there's a lot there. There's a lot of change that's going to happen. Now, with the new Trump administration coming in, there's been a lot of whereas to the Biden, I mean, I don't know how you land politically, but this is objectively what was going on is that the Biden administration was creating tons and tons and tons of restrictions for the development of these models. And in part, that's why it was so costly to develop those models here in the United States, was just because of the level of regulation, right? So one thing that I can confirm that is that with the new incoming Trump administration and with that there have been specific executive orders that have been signed to lessen the restrictions on the development of these of AI within the United States. Okay. So it's a multifaceted problem. But the reason why I'm focusing so much on it is because I think this race is going to take off, right? So what I'm saying is that you have R1 that's come out, right? This is an advanced model. It's beating the United States right now, which is, if you guys think about it, this is the closest thing in our generation to nuclear to nuclear weapons, right? Whereas to before, but when the development of nuclear weapons was taking off, it was like the big battles between like the U.S. and then the USSR and stuff like that. Like this is that type of race, right? Except it's not nuclear; it's in intelligence. So, so the Chinese have just pulled ahead, right? At the same time, the regulatory framework in the United States is going to lessen a lot with the Trump administration. Right now, with the executive orders that I saw, there was one related to AI and there was another one related to crypto. It looks like they haven't really thought about what that regulatory framework is going to be. They haven't thought about it through details, but they have set up the people. Like, if you guys know who David Sachs is, he's definitely much more of a free market kind of guy. So my guess is that they are really going to, and just on the basis of Trump himself, my guess is that they are really going to lessen the restrictions for the development of artificial intelligence in the United States. So it's going to be a big freaking race going on right now. Of course, there's pride in that. There's pride in, okay, you just let your global competitor just like sweep you. Pretty much, that's what happened. That's why the market's reacting the way that it does, is because the American models got swept, right? So because of that the lack of regulations, or the I should say the lessened regulations, there will be more development in artificial intelligence pushing here in the United States. But then there are limiting factors as well. So what it takes to train these models is what was I going to say? So what it takes to train these models isn't just like it's not just like a computer, right? And like in some freaking like dev like stuck in like in an attic or a basement somewhere, right? There's a lot of infrastructure cost to training these models, right? There's the data centers that have to support them, but even more elemental than that is also the electricity that is required to be able to pump up these models. Okay. So there is a natural resource limitation on being able to develop the models properly. Now, this is, I think, when it gets really dicey. And this is potentially, if there's one thing that I could say about this that is kind of scary, is this part here, which is that China has been investing in their electrical infrastructure massively, 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 massively. So they have an electrical grid that is hella advanced and it's like hella modern, right? Like it's like they didn't sleep on that, right? Whereas the United States, we pretty much, if you guys look, like I made a whole video about this. It's like one of my, it's one of my edited videos. I recommend you guys go check it out. But what I was saying in that video and the message that I have right now is that the United States really hasn't invested in real things in a really long time. Like that's why when you, depending on where you live, but if you live like in a city, in a metropolitan area, that's why you see the roads are crumbling. Like our infrastructure is like really usually pretty bad. Our bridges suck. There's a lot of, like I said, a lot of road work that has to get done. Our water systems are not the most effective. There's just we don't like invest time in building real things. We don't invest time in improving real things that we use every day. We're really good at improving the earphones that go in our heads with like AirPods and stuff, but we don't really build anymore here in the United States, right? And we haven't technically done that now for a few generations, right? So our electrical grid is essentially in the past, right? It's probably 30 or 20 years old at this point, insofar as like the last time we actually give a shit about it. And it's not that we don't give a shit about it. I think there is I've from my research, there is a lot of talent here in the United States. There are a lot of engineers. There's a lot of people willing and capable of being able to advance us into the future insofar as infrastructure, insofar as like stuff that's very specific to AI, like the electrical grid. But the problem is that this is the regulatory burden essentially that the United States imposes on your ability to innovate and your ability to build and your ability to create here in the United States. One of the reasons why we became so advanced in our software with the companies that are so widely known now that it's almost annoying to even mention them. But one of the reasons why we became so advanced in our software is because software digital building did not have to this I mean it has some, but it does not have the same regulatory burden that building things in real life does, right? So that's why if you see what innovations have the Americans created in the past 3 decades, most of them have to do with digital innovations, things that are not in the physical space but are in the digital space. Why is that the case? The reason I would argue that that is the case is because everything else requires a permit to be able to do. And those permits that you have to deal with, you got to send a letter to this person, got to wait 7 weeks before that person approves it, and then sends the piece of paper from that desk to the desk over there, stuff like that, right? Like all that red tape makes it so encumbersome for American business to actually take off and to actually innovate that people are just like, you know what? This is impossible. A task that could take me X amount of time, if I don't have the overwhelming amount of regulatory burden, is not just going to take a lot longer because I have to get all these approvals, but it's also going to cost me more because I have to pay. Essentially, I have to pay to get the approvals done and completed, right? So that time delay essentially it's kind of hard to believe that the United States is like that, but it's very true. There's this huge regulatory delay. So essentially, the reason why I'm saying that is because our electrical grid is behind. So because we have a smaller electrical grid in the United States than China does, they literally have what I'm saying is that they have a stronger infrastructure to be able to develop artificial intelligence than the United States does. Here's why that's a problem is if they are now able to develop models that are taking a lot less that are a lot less resource intensive, that are a lot less capital intensive, and they have a bigger infrastructure than we do insofar as being able to provide electricity to these models, then we have a lot of catching up to do. Like it is a tremendous amount of catching up that we have to do. And there is, I think, what is occurring right now in the industry, a paradigm shift as to how are we even going to approach the development of AI now moving forward. But the reason why I labeled this a live stream, why I think that the AI race is going to intensify, is because now that those regulatory burdens are going to start melting away for the development of artificial intelligence in the United States and the paradigm, the understanding that, hey, look, it might not take billions of dollars to have to train a model, a net new model. It's actually somewhere in the millions, which for technology purposes is much more of a reasonable cost to the development of a model. Then that means that the US is about that, from my analysis, and I could be wrong, but we do call it tech industry analysis. From my analysis, this thing is about to rip. It's about to rip higher than it's ripped before. Um, I don't know what that means insofar as like stocks, who's going to be the players, none of that necessarily, because I think all of that is on the table now. It's not evident to me that OpenAI really will continue to have the lead from this point forward, especially once the Americans crack how it is that the Chinese were able to do what they did. and pulled it off. Once that it starts to get replicated here in the United States, I think whatever we've seen insofar as AI innovation, whatever we've seen insofar as AI proliferation is now about to multiply because they were able to get OpenAI, all these other companies, even like the big players, all of them were able to do this with all that regulatory burden, even in the first place, right? So like they had essentially all of this red tape that they had to deal with to be able to develop the models, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they were still able to do it. That's part of the reason why it costs so much. Now that that burden's gone, there's just going to be more players introduced into the fold. Like I said, especially once that it's cracked how it is that the Chinese were able to do it, then more people are going to, more companies, more individuals are going to rethink how it is that they develop artificial intelligence, and that is because of it, the fact that it's going to be easier to develop as well. The speed at which the innovations are going to take place is going to increase. Now, I'm not so fixed on the idea of like, oh, like it's going to be like a sentient intelligence and all that stuff. I don't really think it's heading that way. I think it's more leaning towards just a lot of, and it's kind of what you're seeing now, right? Where it's actually just a development of law of individual models. Um, and that I think is going to, that's going to amplify. So if you thought I was crazy now, I think it's going to get crazier. Um, and is that a good or a bad thing? I'm not really gonna make that I'm not gonna make a judgment call. I would say the thing that I would have an opinion on is that I'd rather have the US be in front than China, right? For reasons that I think are pretty obvious. But from a career perspective as well, I think that that really starts to make me think that it's a good idea to keep looking into this field. It's a good idea to keep integrating the technology into the things that I'm doing because it's seeming more and more like it's going to be how we do things. Um, Not every use case is the best use case, and I've made videos memeing that it's really not that great at in certain use cases. As time has gone on, though, one of the things that I remember saying in those videos is that, look, I'm sure that they're going to keep throwing money at this thing. And now I think what's happening is that they're realizing that they don't have to throw as much money to get a equivalent or better output than what's currently in the market right now. And that's why there's so much shift occurring. And really there's a lot of shame in tech in the United States because there's been such Chamath, if you guys know who Chamath from the All In podcast was saying, big investor in Silicon Valley was saying effectively that we lost sight of even innovating in the software space. We lost sight of really being the leaders in this stuff, and it became so many of the companies that were known for their digital innovations even became essentially married to this bureaucratic red tape, the middle managers of the world, the associates of associates of directors of associates, director, associate director kind of types of people, right? And that kind of stuff, when from my actual experience, is very legitimate. It's not about innovating, but the current tech is not about in the United States. It's not really about innovating. It's not really about who's going to push the next big idea. It's essentially about retaining and remaining within the status quo. How are you going to support the status quo? How are you going to get approval? You have to write a white paper to get approval. To get an approval to change two pieces of code. We're not really innovating anymore in the U.S. And I think that in order for us to stay competitive in this race, it needs to occur. The innovation needs to return, and because those guardrails are being moved away, at least in this administration, I really do think that this is going to be one of the incentives for American innovation in this decade. And we're asked to these past, um, I mean, multiple years, probably, I mean, maybe since like the 1960s, 1970s, any real improvement to our infrastructure, any real improvement to the physical reality of our lives, not just the digital one, had to come to a halt, right? So this I think can create incentive for innovation once again in the United States, and that's crazy because I haven't seen it in my lifetime. I've seen digital and small device innovation, but aside from really like aside from these exceptions like Elon Musk and SpaceX and Tesla, we don't really see these massive innovations. This is not the country hasn't innovated for a really long time in that regard. And I think that that is soon to change because the incentives are changing. And once those incentives change, once it's seen as profitable, once it's seen as a viable way to make a living and to really go and catch that American dream, once innovation is seen that way again in the United States, which I think this it's opening up that way, then that's when you're going to start seeing crazy stuff really happen because it's not just the digital innovations, but it starts being the physical innovations around us. We start moving away from older forms of energy. We start moving into nuclear. Our roads get a bunch of improvement, little things that would just be improved by some common sense. Um, it- we'll start seeing those things occurring again, right? So it won't just be the AI, but it's going to be all the stuff around us. And I think in a way, it's good for us because it's more opportunity. It's more opportunity, and if you're right now in the job market or you've worked in tech or you're just around this space, you know that there's a stagnant feel to everything, right? There's that stagnant of like, damn, like hasn't really moved in a few decades now. And for somebody in my generation, man, that's like the stuff that I always that's you go grow you get those big dreams, you want to go and do big stuff, you want to go and innovate, you want to go be building stuff. Like nobody really, like, if you think about it, if you're watching right now, like you don't really just want to sit and like do nothing, right? Like, but if you really, your heart of hearts, maybe you do that sometimes, but in your heart you're like, man, like I really want to make my life worth something. Like you want to go out there and you want to build something, you want to use your hands or you want to use your mind, but you want to leave a mark on your time in this earth. And it just for like the past 3 decades, or I mean, really for a really long time, probably since the after World War II, for us, it hasn't been that. It's been our generations have been more of like, hey, how well can you sit in an office, and how well can you just follow orders? Like that's really more of what our generations have been like. It's not really about like, hey, bro, like what are you actually trying to build? Like, what are you trying to do? Is like it's more about like, hey, how well can you conform? Hey, stand in the line. Don't step outside that little box because if you stay, like all that kind of stuff. And I really think we are now potentially seeing, or what I believe that we are now seeing that pivot in our life where we were just kind of going like this for a really long time in terms of tech innovation. Now I think it's gonna start to pop, 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 and that's a huge opportunity. That's a huge opportunity for us. It's a wake up call for everybody who has been depending on the system in the way that it's existed, because things are going to continue to shift. And it's going to be the people who are willing to shift and adapt to those changes, who are in front of it, that are really going to benefit. And it might not make sense to you now, but I recommend you watching this same live stream a few months from now. And I think all the things will start to click. So, Sputnik of the yeah, exactly. Sputnik of the 2025 Cold War. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of political implications to being behind on AI that I think people don't really like to think about. But if if you think about if you talk about like the space race, that's correct, G Money. Like if you think about that space race, do you really want your enemy being the one that's in front of you, right? And I think that that's what's burning a hole in everybody right now, is that like they fell asleep at the wheel. Well, we were just kind of like, pushing paper and just lollygagging, not really producing much. China was just like in the background, just like, all right, we're just gonna hack at this and just gonna keep doing our thing. Oh yeah, we're gonna build like the best electrical grid in the whole world. Oh yeah, our infrastructure is gonna be all advanced and all this stuff. And then boom, we hit 2025 and our physical reality is like 30 years behind. It's like 30 years ago. Like the last updates to it were like in freaking 1990, right? Or 1980 some right? So it's just like it's a big slap in the face. Wait, it's a big wake up call is really what it is, because it's like, okay, well, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna take your eye off the ball, then your competitors are gonna start smoking you, and that's what happens. That's what happens in your life. That's what happens in my life, and it's what happens to countries. It's what happens to nations. When you stop focusing on that matters, when you stop focusing on the work that matters, and you get distracted by all this BS, then of course you're going to start getting smoked. And I think that there's a changing tide right now. Like I said, there's going to be less regulations on AI. There's going to be a crypto framework. I'm not a big crypto guy myself. I mean, uh, if you guys have followed the channel for a really long time, I'm a bit of a maxi, but um, at the very least, there's going to be a regulatory framework for crypto in the United States, which there hadn't been before, you know? And what does that mean? Like, that means that talent is leaving the United States. I mean, the burdensome obstacles, regulatory obstacles in the United States, not to mention the taxes in this country. Essentially, if you guys ever read The Sovereign Individual, one of the key things that it was talking about in that book is that people were going to start leaving. And when I look at my feeds, a lot of the homies that used to live here, or a lot of the homies that have spent time here building their skills, building their talent, they go to other countries because they're just like, F this. Like, like, I get treated like crap here. My skills are not appreciated. There's all this stuff like, oh, I get taxed up the wazoo. Like, if I try to build anything, it's going to cost me a bunch of money. I got to send a permit to some person in the city, and they're not going to get back to me till 10 years. And I know that paper's like sitting on their desk. Like, everything is just so burdensome here to try to do anything, that it's just like it's a miracle to me that we even try, right? Of course, you try if you're American because it's like the only place you know, right? It's like you're only familiar with that, but it's not until you step outside that paradigm you start to realize you're like, you know what, like maybe the best place, like for me, is not here in the United States. Maybe it's somewhere else. And I really think that now with the change in administration, a goal of the Trump administration is to bring those people back, to bring that talent back into the United States. And if that's the case, then I think that might be a benefit to all of us ultimately from an economic perspective, regardless of where you lie politically. If it's easier to buy your groceries at the store, then I would argue that objectively is a good thing. You could decide however you want to think about that, but I would think that most Americans would agree on that specific point. So, other than that, guys, that's it for tonight. I really appreciate you guys riding along. Please make sure we're almost at 1,000 subscribers. We need to get 1,000 subscribers to monetize the channel. Once we monetize the channel, we'll keep putting up like sick ass equipment, and you guys will be able to send what is it called? They're called live chats, or what are they called? Super chats if you want to. But other than that, if you guys comment in the comment section below, I'll make sure to highlight your comments. You don't have to pay me anything. I love highlighting your guys' comments because I love when you participate. It's not just me up here rambling. Well, it is me up here rambling, but the key point that I want to make is that I want to build this tech industry analysis into a community. So it's a conversation that we're all taking. I'm doing my best to keep up with the research to give you guys the information that is valuable to you, but I'm just one guy, so I can always use your help in the comment section. Give me your opinion. What do you think about this topic? Should the United States be investing in or spending time lessening those regulations? Are regulations a good thing, perhaps? Right? Is China bluffing? Are they bluffing? Are they being for real? Like, it will really only cost $1 million to develop, or is that just something that's convenient for them to say because they are trying to compete and it's a marketing thing? Right? What's going to happen to Nvidia? I mean, I have my specific opinions about what's going to happen to Nvidia, but um, which is really in the long run, they're still going to be useful. They might not be as high up, but I think that they're still going to be useful. But what do you think? Like, do you think that they're going to be useful? Do you think they're going to go away tomorrow? What are your thoughts on that? And I am super curious to know. I happen to know that my audience is very intelligent, so I don't expect you guys to. I expect you guys to be, or my belief is that you guys are like pretty deep thinkers. So make sure to let me know. Other than that, too, if you are or you know somebody who is in the need of building a website. So if you need a website built for you, make sure to go to freelancejuice.com and enter your email so that we can work together. So let me bring this over here. Yes, thank you. And just going to share my screen. So yeah, if you need a website built for whatever reason, if you're freelancing or you have a business inquiry, make sure to go to freelancejuice.com. Let's just share the screen there. Share screen. Oh, okay. It looks like I'm having an error with the share, but I'll just add it there. So yeah, go to freelancejuice.com, enter your email, and then we will set up a time to discuss. and that way we could build you guys something. It's an exciting time to be alive, and it'd be cool to work with you. If you have an idea, I do anything from custom software development to just a business website. We could throw WordPress up for you. I do e-commerce as well, blogs, you name it. Just depends on what your idea is, what it is that you want to build. I know that's a question I get all the time as a software developer. It's like, oh, I have this crazy idea of this thing that I want to build. A lot of times I can't entertain those ideas because I don't have the time, or the person just doesn't want to pay me. But if you are interested in something that will be a business transaction to build that thing that you want, that special thing that you want, that is a service that I offer at freelancejuice.com. That's freelancejuice.com. The link is in the chat. Other than that, guys, I really appreciate you guys for rocking with me in this show. If you like the content, make sure to like. Again, make sure to subscribe. Once we get past 1,000 subscribers, we will be able to monetize the channel. Well, we need watch hours too, but one of the key metrics that we need is we need to get past 1,000 subscribers. So thank you so much, and I will catch you on the next one. Peace.